Hey folks, today I've got your full in-depth review and 17 things to know about the new GoPro Hero Black 11. I've been putting it through its paces over the last month or so. I've got tons of side-by-side comparison footage in this video illustrating each one of these new features and where it works well and not so well. As such, this video is definitely not sponsored. I'm going to tell it like it is, just like I always do. Now, two quick things to note. Number one is that this is not the only camera GoPro released today. They also released the GoPro Hero Black Mini, which is a smaller version of this. Basically got the same internals, but no screen and some other minor tweaks. You'll see my video up on that in the corner there. And then the second thing is I've added YouTube chapters along the bottom so you can find the section that you want. With that, let's just dive right into it. The very first item on our list is the price. The price remains the same from last year, which is $399 with a GoPro subscription, either one that you buy with the camera or the one you already have, or it's $499 if you do not have a GoPro subscription. Note that when you buy for the $399 with a subscription, it doesn't cost anything extra, but there's some new features we'll talk about later on that leverage that may be worthwhile considering. Now, the first technical goodie that have changed here is a new sensor. It's a 1/1.9 sensor, which I know doesn't mean a whole lot to you. What is meaningful to you though is a new field of view option within that, which is 8/7. Basically means it's a giant ass square. And the idea behind this, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, is that you can basically crop into that. So you can have a vertical one, you can have a horizontal image, all after the fact later on in the app. So essentially it gives you way more resolution to play with. Now, while GoPro still calls it a 5.3K resolution, the reality is it has way more pixels than the existing 5.3K resolution. You can see that on the screen right here. It's like almost 50% more resolution, more pixels to work with. Note that this new giant square digital lens is available up to 5.3K 30, or what they call 5.3K. I mean, you can't go beyond that to like 60 frames per second, but I find it just fine at 30 frames per second for the vast majority of things. Also, GoPro is still using the existing GP2 chipset that they introduced last year. So the next item on the list is the adopting of 10-bit color. And that's mostly useful from an editing standpoint, but just to put it in perspective, 8-bit color, which is what they had in the past, gave you about 16 million colors to work with. In other words, the color space the camera could see. Now it has 1 billion, billion with a B, like boy and bumblebee and all sorts of B words like that. So it's a ton of colors. Again, it's kind of hard to see through a YouTube video, but it's far more useful for editors after the fact to change color and do color grading. Now, we'll be posting a full video just of footage if you want to look at it. It'll be linked shortly if somewhere on the screen here. But in the meantime, if you check out the description down there, you'll be able to find a Dropbox share with some files that you can play with that are direct out of the camera and totally unedited. Speaking of which, all the samples that you see in this video are 100% unedited. They're not modified in any way, shape, or form by me. They're just straight out of the camera. Now, next up, GoPro has added a wider digital lens. Digital lenses are basically how they consider the different views that you have, wide, linear, Superview, etc. And the newest one is called HyperView. Not to be confused with hyperlapse. That's for time lapses and stuff. Hyperlapse is a 12mm lens compared to the existing 16mm lens. They essentially take that new 8x7 square and then pull it out into a 16:9 frame. It's designed for chest mounted cameras or point of view stuff like this. It's really focused on action sports, which I know sounds obvious for an action camera, or angles where you want to get something super wide, like maybe inside of a car looking forward. Now, in my testing, it is very, very cool. The only caveat though is you have to kind of use it a little bit sparingly. It works great in certain scenarios, and other scenarios you're kind of that looks a little bit wobbly because of the way it pulls it down from that image and kind of spreads it out a little bit. So again, sometimes it's awesome and sometimes you're like, nah, not this time around. Next up is Horizon Lock. This is something that was previously only available with the GoPro Max lens mod, but now you can do it directly in camera. So to kind of illustrate this, I'm going to point it at you. Here's the camera. I'm going to rotate it like this, but you're now watching and seeing that the actual image in the camera itself is completely level the entire time. It's essentially like stabilization plus. So it always keeps that horizon perfectly level no matter what the camera is doing. And here's another perspective right here. Again, the camera going up, rotating over, back down again, and it's always level. Next up there is HyperSmooth Boost. Now HyperSmooth, just kind of set the stage here, is GoPro's stabilization layer. It's on version 5 right now, and what all stabilization layers do on all action cameras that are electronic, which is basically all action cameras today, is they have a giant sensor image and then they crop into a little bit like this, and they kind of bounce around within that to keep the image stable. The challenge when you have this though is that sometimes you're on perfectly stable roads and you're losing this extra bit up there. So what Boost does is when it's on stable roads, it expands back out again, kind of slowly, and then as you go careening off a stable road onto a dirt road, then it slowly crops back in again to maintain that stabilization. It's really hard to demonstrate this, as obvious as it may sound, because it's so subtle. So I tried doing it here on a bike where I basically was super stable and then bumped up onto this dirt section. My demo kind of works, but the main thing here is that you don't notice any artifacts of weirdness. So in that sense, the feature is working. It's just not super obvious at first glance. Hey, just a quick note, if you are finding this video interesting and useful, now is an amazing time to whack that like button. It really does help out this video and the channel quite a bit. Next Next up, there's these new awesome night video modes. These are super cool. Essentially, there's 3 different modes. The first one is an astrophotography mode. It is like star trails, if you will. So it's not like photography, it's astrovideography. It's star trails, that's what it's called. You basically just stick your camera out there for a few hours and it makes this star thing that you see right there. I even got it working just fine in the city. In Amsterdam proper, it's producing star trails just fine on clear nights. And then of course the clouds come in and that kind of looks cool too though. So it is all video, by the way. So it actually produces this little video there. The next new light mode within that is the vehicle trails mode. Same general concept. You stick your camera somewhere, but for much shorter durations. So these little clips that you see right there, I only put the camera for about 5 to 7 minutes just on a highway overpass and watch the cars go underneath. And then finally, there's light painting. So if you got lights, you can go ahead and basically paint whatever message or sign or thing that you want on the sky at night, and the camera just does it all for you automatically in box. These are 3 features that are incredibly difficult to try to do yourself using still photography, but GoPro makes it so you just press a single button and boom, it's done in a few minutes to a couple hours, depending on what you're doing. Next up, we got a quickie but a biggie. GoPro has now expanded Superview into 5.3K 60 as well as 4K 120 frames per second. So really kind of pushing the boundaries. Superview is super useful, super, again, double super there. It is super useful in point of view when you don't quite want to go to hyperlapse. It is my de facto mode, if you will, for any mountain biking, skiing, anything like that to get the full kind of picture in the scene. So the ability now to shoot at 60 frames per second in 5.3K or to do it 120 frames per second in 4K is pretty big. Now next up, we're going to dive into an app thing, but don't worry, we're going to get back to more camera stuff in a second because it's all kind of related. So coming up in an update later on this year, sometime this fall, GoPro will allow you in the GoPro Quick app to change the digital lens after the fact. I know that sounds boring, but it's a massive, massive thing. Basically, when you shoot anything on a GoPro, anytime you press this record button, you're shooting in one of the different digital lens modes, wide, linear, superview, etc. With this new update though, you can change that after the fact. So I can shoot wide right now and go, no, I don't like that right now. I'm going to crop it into linear, get rid of that fisheye look, and you're done. In that same vein of GoPro app stuff, there's a new update to the desktop app coming out that allows you to go ahead and export out different aspect ratios. Meaning you can shoot in that full big square sensor we talked about earlier, and then quickly and easily export out within a vertical frame or horizontal frame, whatever you want. And that's also compatible with GoPro Real Steady, so if you're flying a drone and using that footage, it's a little bit quicker to pop those out in different aspect ratios. Next up, an update for the still photography side of things, which is that they've increased the megapixels from 23 to 27. Again, that comes with that larger sensor size there. And then with that, they've also added a slate of new burst modes. I'll put them on the screen here because you don't want me to audibly repeat all those. It'll take forever. Keep in mind that GoPro is saying, and I agree with them on this as well, that the vast majority of people these days are just using the GoPro Quick app to grab a still from video. That way they don't have to mess with getting the exact shot. Given that you're shooting at 60 to 120 frames per second and the color and the depth is so good, it's just way easier to do that than try to get a still. Next up, GoPro is including the Enduro Battery in every single GoPro Hero 11 box, meaning that is a default battery for the Hero 11. That has 3 kind of core things on it. Number one, it's just got more battery runtime. Up to 38% is what their claim is compared to the past. My testing last year with the Hero 10 proved that out pretty easily. That's definitely true. 2, and far more importantly, it has really good cold weather performance. I could put it in a freezer, leave it overnight, and start the camera, which you could absolutely not do with a regular battery. And 3, note that while most of the battery improvement claims GoPro is making come from that battery more so than the camera itself, there is a small portion of those battery claim increases that is actually coming from the camera and changes they've made around the battery consumption in different modes to eke out a little bit more battery life. Next, one big change you will notice the first time you turn on a GoPro Hero 11 is that the user interface looks different, at least temporarily. So GoPro has introduced a new easy mode. Basically the idea being that when you turn on the first time and you have no idea what a GoPro is, it's just simply easier to use. Now of course, if you're like me and you've been around these cameras for quite a while, then you probably get instantly toggled to Pro mode, which puts you exactly back into the regular user interface. Speaking of which, I will have a full in-depth beginner's guide on the Hero 11. It's going to be 45 to 50 minutes long, walking through every single feature. That'll be linked shortly up above here in the next couple of days. That was my most popular video last year with over 1 million views on this 45-minute long extravaganza. So I think you're going to enjoy this year as well. So the next item is 2 new video modes. These take the place of the video performance modes that GoPro introduced last year after launch due to overheating concerns, and we'll get to that in just a second. These 2 modes are called highest quality and extended battery. And the idea here is that it basically does what it says. So in highest quality, it's going to give you all the flexibility to shoot at the highest resolutions and frame rates. It's going to burn through through the battery as fast as it can, and it's not going to worry about the heat aspect of it. Versus in the extended battery side of it, it's going to try to prolong the battery, going to try to prolong the heat management side of things to go ahead and give you the longest possible shooting, but maybe toning down some of the stabilization or toning down some of the frame rates or the resolutions. The only downside of this though is that you've lost the tripod mode, which was actually really useful. You can make it yourself by just turning off a couple more things once you go to the battery mode, but I would love to see that still there because I actually just used the tripod mode on a Hero 10 last weekend, shooting an hour-long video in the sun with it statically mounted, and it kept going the entire time. So that brings us to overheating. Does this camera still overheat? And the answer is yes, it will. Like virtually every other action camera in the market, at some point it will overheat depending on the scenarios. Now, as I showed last year with 40 plus different tests, essentially this camera will not overheat in 30 frames per second in pretty much any scenario. It also will not overheat as long as there's some airflow. So right now you can probably see it's a bit breezy out here. It's not going to overheat despite being almost 90 degrees. It's just the way these cameras are designed to have airflow around them. Where it will overheat though is if you put it indoors on a table, press the record button and leave it at 60 frames per second, it'll die in about 30 minutes or so. And that's notable because DJI announced their new Action 3 today, and that camera had one thing in life. It had one goal in life, which was to not overheat in any way, shape, or form at 4K 60. And it doesn't. Side by side, that camera did not overheat in a static room at 4K 60. Now, as I used the Hero 10 over the past year, I didn't really have any overheating problems, despite plenty of time in really hot places, even this last week at 105-degree temperatures, and it didn't overheat, and neither did the Hero 11 Black. The key is understanding which modes to use in which circumstances, and ensuring that you're just not leaving it on in the sun for 45 to 50 minutes. Now, certainly that is a use case. It's in a very, very valid use case. And in that case, you're going to have to simply reduce the frames per second from 60 down to 30 in order to keep it going. I'll probably do a deeper dive video on this though, between this and the Action 3 on just overheating because it's a really fascinating area. So stay tuned for that as well. Next, for GoPro subscribers, you're going to get a new auto highlight reel for that entire day's worth of footage. So basically you take your camera at the end of the day, you plug it in, it syncs all that stuff via Wi-Fi up to the GoPro cloud. That's all included at the full resolutions, all the same stuff from the past. Except once that's all done doing that, it'll take up to 75 clips from that day, which is a fair number of clips, by the way, and then it'll combine them together and make an edit for you automatically. And then another nice little GoPro subscriber feature is that when it does that sync now from your camera and its SD card up to the GoPro cloud, there's an option, a toggle, it is optional, to go ahead and delete the footage off of the camera itself. So you got a clean SD card there once it's confirmed all the footage is on the server. You'll then get a message after the fact showing you that you have X amount of space left. And again, that feature is totally optional. By default, it is off. It's something you have to manually turn on. And then finally, a hit list of all the is it still compatible questions. Number one, it's still compatible with existing GoPro 9 and 10 batteries. Number two, it's still compatible with existing GoPro 9 and 10 cases because it's the exact same size unit. Number three, it's compatible with all existing GoPro Max Lens mod, Media mod, Light mod. All the mods are compatible for the Hero 9 and 10 anyways with this camera because it's, again, it's exact same size. Number four, it is still fully waterproof down to 33 feet or I think 10, 11 meters or so. I've been doing that for the last month in the water, including just a moment ago down there, no problems at all. So with that, the question is this worthwhile upgrading from the Hero 10? And the answer as always is it depends on whether or not you found any of these 17 or so things useful to you. For me, I will switch over to this camera mostly for the increased Superview frame rates, as well as some like the minor features. But I think for most people, if you have a Hero 10, you're probably good as is. If you have a Hero 8, then definitely I think it's worthwhile, a pretty significant upgrade. A Hero 9 kind of sits in the middle. Now, of course, there's also the new DJI Action 3 that was announced today. I've got a full video on that up in the corner there. And then shortly I'll have like a versus video, if you will, between the GoPro Hero Black 11 and the DJI Action 3, Osmo Action 3, because it's a super compelling like bake-off, if you will. In the past, it wasn't so compelling. Now it's getting interesting, getting spicy. Anyways, hopefully you found this video interesting or useful. Don't forget my full beginner's guide coming up in the corner there. Takes you through this camera from start to finish, unboxing through every single one of those features from someone who uses a GoPro every single day doing what I do. And of course, if you're not subscribed, definitely do that because the next couple weeks are crazy in the sports tech world and you don't want to miss it. With that, have a good one.